So hello. For those who don't know me, my name is Mary Ann Lalonde, and I am the president of the Lakeside Area Neighbors Association. And I have gotten a lot of questions about the proposed development that is going on in Weiss Hospital surface parking lot. And I wanted to try to illuminate that situation through this video and a little short PowerPoint presentation. And also this video is meant to be a message for the other members of the 46 Ward Zoning and Development Committee who meets on Thursday night, April 29th at 7 p.m. And if you'd like to attend that meeting, you can register on the Alderman's website for the Zoom link. And if you don't know what that committee is or who your block club is, check out the links below to learn a little bit more about how zoning changes are made in the 46th Ward. And regardless of whether or not this is something you're interested in, I want to encourage you to join your local block club. I'm gonna get started here. And like I said, this is a message to the 46 Ward Zoning and Development Committee. And today we're going to talk about the development at 4600 North Marine Drive that is proposed by Lincoln Properties. But this development story doesn't really start with Lincoln Properties or the structure. It actually starts with the hospital administrator, Pipeline Health. So Weiss Hospital was purchased by Pipeline from another hospital company, Tenet, in 2019, along with two other Chicago area hospitals, Westlake and West Suburban. And Pipeline promised to keep all three hospitals open and operating. And 2 weeks after they made that promise, they actually closed Westlake. And we were especially troubled to learn through the bankruptcy transcripts for Westlake Hospital that Pipeline actually never intended to keep Westlake open. They had promised Tenet during the sale of the hospital that they would close Westlake, and it was a condition of the sale of those three hospitals from Tenet to Pipeline, which is really troubling. Westlake formed a shell company so that the property could declare this bankruptcy, and they also ended up in a lawsuit with the Village of Melrose Park since they had lied about keeping the hospital open, and they had to pay a $1.5 million fine to settle that lawsuit. There are really a lot more troubling reports from Westlake employees. A Westlake worker said that Pipeline routinely shorted his pay. They alerted EMTs to bypass Westlake's ER, and they moved vital equipment from Westlake to West Suburban in the middle of the night. They kept employees in the dark about this closure until right when it happened. They responded defensively when community members who inquired about how the closure might impact their physical health. And so we really love and value Weiss Hospital. We know that some of these concerns have been privately expressed to us by staff and physicians at Weiss who are afraid that something like what happened at Westlake could happen at Weiss too. So Pipeline is the owner of this land that is asking for the zoning change. And the land in question is the surface parking lot of Weiss at Wilson and Marine Drive. So not their multi-story parking structure, but the flat lot that currently has the COVID-19 testing tents and the entrance to the ER. But since we're so skeptical of Pipeline's intentions with Weiss, we don't want to allow Pipeline to take advantage of our community by using the proceeds from this land, which is a community asset. It's land that was aggregated to be a hospital in the 1950s. It's meant to serve our community. Anyway, we don't want them to use it to pay off their debts and benefit their investors without there being also a shared benefit to the community. So what I'm trying to tell you is Pipeline is an untrustworthy company. So they actually may come to the zoning meeting on Thursday. They may assure you that they're going to keep the hospital open. They will probably tell you a lot of beautiful things about how they've invested in electronic medical records and have a lot of ambitions to buy new equipment. But I just want to remind you that they had no trouble lying to state legislators and to the village of Melrose Park. And I'm not sure that they would treat us any differently. So the kinds of questions we should be asking ourselves are, do they really intend to keep Weiss open if they are building residential so close to the ER entrance? Why won't they share this document that we've asked them for that has the conditions of the sale between Pipeline and tenant to see if there's a promise to close Weiss, just like there was a promise to close Westlake? And why won't they tell us who their investors are, who are ultimately going to profit from the sale of this land that is a community asset? So we as a block club, we have been working on this for a while to get these questions answered from Pipeline. We were first introduced to Pipeline because in 2019, they applied for a tax exemption from the Illinois Health Facilities and Services Review Board that drew the attention of our state legislators who felt that it was kind of a suspicious request. So that was when we started to question their intentions with Weiss. And since then, Weiss has removed community programming. They've closed the urban rooftop farm on top of their multi-story parking structure. They did that without notifying the members of that farm or the community in advance. And they also own this medical professional building that's right next to Weiss. It's long had many vacancies and they've not made a lot of progress in renting it. And for these reasons, we're worried that they intend at least to downsize the hospital. And you'll see in a few slides why it's so important that we actually keep all of the services that are at Weiss at present, because they're actually really specific to our community. So keeping Weiss open with all of its current services, that should be everybody's top priority. Weiss serves a significant volume of patients whose healthcare is supported by Medicare and Medicaid instead of commercial insurance. And the Uptown neighborhood encompasses the second highest poverty tract on Chicago's north side in terms of the census, and it's also a Department of Mental Health catchment area. Weiss has the Center for Gender Confirmation Surgery, which is particularly important to the trans community. Only 1 out of 3 surgeons in the whole state of Illinois who performs phalloplasty is an employee of Weiss. Weiss is also a stroke center. It's the closest one proximal to the high density of senior residents who are more susceptible to stroke as senior citizens living in the Edgewater neighborhood. So keeping Weiss open, it's not only in the economic best interest of our neighborhood, it's a matter of social justice and equitable access to healthcare. So since the state has been duped before by Pipeline with Westlake, our state legislators are hard at work in Springfield trying to pass bills that prevent the hospital from closing abruptly. But they haven't all hit the governor's desk yet, and we're still investigating to try to figure out if and when they do get passed, if Pipeline will be grandfathered into the old laws or if these new laws will apply to them. So it's still very much underway and incomplete, but they're working very hard to protect us. So let's now move from Pipeline and talk about what is proposed here, the potential buyer for this land, Lincoln Properties. They want to build a 12-story residential building with 2.5% on-site affordable and the remaining required 7.5% in lieu of fees going into the ARO. And hey, this looks pretty familiar to this committee, right? So some of us want to see more family size affordable housing go into the neighborhood. Some of us want to attract wealthier residents because they believe that more density will boost our local economy and make the neighborhood safer. And these are the voting lines that this committee typically falls on. But I do want to take a quick aside and talk about the affordable housing aspect here, because there are a few other things you should know. To adhere to the Affordable Requirements Ordinance, the developer is going to have those 8 affordable units on site. And for those 7.5% fees, instead of having the affordable on-site, those are apparently going to go to Sarah Circle. They also have a proposed development on Sheridan Road, across the street from ICA, in the ICA's parking lot. I just want you to know that this is not a charitable donation to Sarah Circle. This is their legal obligation to pay these in lieu of fees. And the way that I understand it is that these funds, they don't directly go to Sarah Circle. They're required to pay into this ARO fund. And this fund would be used to fund the development at Sarah Circle, but it's also used to fund many other city projects. So another factor about this is the current ARO allows the developer to pay 7.5% of their required 10% as in lieu of fees. But City Council actually this week just passed a revision to the ARO. That would change things where the minimum amount of in lieu of fees, or the minimum amount of on-site affordable, would be increased from 2.5% to 5%. So they could only pay the remaining 5% into the in lieu of fees. So the result of all of this math is that if we waited for the new ARO to apply to this developer, the developer would need to have 16 units on site and not 8. But while the ARO was just passed, my understanding is that it does not go into effect until October of this year. So we'd have to wait to get those additional on-site affordable units mandated. Another thing is that in the new ARO, these in lieu of fees have to go to build structures, to build units that are 2 bedrooms or more, so family-sized units. That wasn't a part of the old ARO, but it's a part of the new one, and those units could be built anywhere in the city. Okay, affordable housing aside, complete. Just want to say again that regardless of whether or not you're in the camp where you like affordable housing or you don't like it, we could spend 3 hours tonight debating that and talking about other things we usually talk about, like how the building looks or how tall it is or whether or not it plans to seek a LEED certification, and they do not. But we have no business doing that because we're still dealing with Pipeline, who might close our hospital. And maybe one day we'll get there. Maybe one day we'll get to have this very traditional development discussion and talk about things like FAR and facade and historic relevance to the neighborhood, which I should add, Weiss and the Covington, the apartment building across the street, are both eligible for the National Historic Register. And Julia Bachrock just proposed landmarking for the Covington. Covington would be completely eclipsed from the lake by this development in its current form. But we could have this real debate, you know, it would be a grand old 46 Ward zoning and development meeting like we've had many times before. And should we get to that day, our block club should really have the opportunity to negotiate aesthetics and unit sizes and height with the developer first, just like all of your block clubs do in your area, to see the shade studies and traffic studies that we have requested and not yet received from the developer, just to make sure that we hit a few compromises before we move forward. But no revisions to the original draft of this development have been made. We're still working with the exact proposal that this developer showed to us in January for the very first time. And this is a valuable area with lakefront views. And also we're still dealing with Pipeline, who might close our hospital. So if we don't do the zoning change this week, or at least if we wait to do it, it stops the sale from Pipeline to Lincoln Properties. The sale is contingent on the zoning change. So until our state reps can protect us from losing our hospital, or until we can make public the terms of the sale of Weiss between Pipeline and Tenet, we shouldn't even be entertaining a proposal from Lincoln Properties. And when we get there, Lincoln Properties is still going to want this land. So if you really love development and you don't want to miss out on an opportunity, Lincoln Properties is going to want this, or another developer will, because these lakefront views are not going out of style. So don't think you're going to miss out on loading new rental properties if you vote no or to delay tonight. All you are doing is buying us more time to build the right thing, which again, we haven't gotten a chance to discuss at all, or to protect our hospital and keep service here for folks with Medicaid and the LGBT community and seniors, who are all important parts of our neighborhood. And I don't think you're going to feel bad about that vote to delay, because for some of you block clubs that always vote with the local block club, you will be voting with us too, because about 75% of our membership is opposed to this development, at least of the votes we could collect so far. Because we just found out about this development in January, and we've only had 2 meetings with the developer on Zoom. And then the alderman intervened and said we had to stop our feedback process because he felt that the questions that we asked in both of our meetings were redundant, even though we feel that all of our questions have not been adequately answered at this point. And we haven't seen any revisions at all to the development based on our feedback. So look, there is a global pandemic still. There is civil unrest, and our country is going through a lot of difficult times right now. And our block club membership isn't immune to that. We really try to do our best in LANA and be inclusive in our voting process, because LANA includes a substantial number of non-native English speakers, multiple low-income housing structures where people have inconsistent internet access, so it makes it really hard to join a Zoom meeting. People have competing priorities and may not have the privilege that all of us have who are going to be at the zoning meeting on Thursday, to spend 3 hours at an online community meeting on a weeknight. Since January, we have developed a new way to vote through inserting index cards in these physical boxes that we've strategically placed throughout our boundaries to try to be more inclusive about people who have access to Google Forms or not, or Wi-Fi. And normally, we also try to translate all of our development materials into Vietnamese and Russian, but given the timeline that the alderman has forced to work with, we just have not had time for that. We only found out about the zoning meeting on April 15th, so 2 weeks ago. We found out from reading the alderman's newsletter, barely left us 2 weeks to collect votes, and our voting collection process is longer because it's a pandemic. For development of this magnitude, where I cannot emphasize enough, this is not just about affordable housing, height, and aesthetics. This is a risk to a community asset, to the largest employer in the ward, and we just deserve more time and attention to pay to it. So I'm asking you to write this community process. Give time for our state legislators to ensure the laws they are working so hard to pass in Springfield right now are in place to protect us and our hospital before this sale and this development moves forward. And give our block club what any of your block clubs would want: a meaningful two-way dialogue that results in real compromise and revisions instead of just ramming through a completely unedited draft of a building. Don't rush through a vote tonight without going back to your own block clubs and explaining this hugely complicated situation to them, because while it impacts our block club the most, losing a community hospital would impact all of us. So I want to thank you guys for watching this YouTube video. Get to the meeting. I'm happy to speak more and answer more questions about LANA's process. If you are new to all of this, please join your block club. And please support us and work with us to protect Weiss and to keep Weiss here. Thanks so much.